Hey, Hio here, back with another video, and this time let's talk about skill rotations. Now, as a new player, you've probably heard this term get tossed around a lot as you progress through the game and learn about the nuances of the combat mechanics in the game. For veteran players though, this is not a new word, probably. In this video, we are gonna go through how I learned my skill rotations, and hopefully it might help you as well, from one noob, I myself, to another, when it comes to learning your first rotation. But first, what exactly is a skill rotation? Well, it is a set of skills that you do successively to one another in order to deal optimal damage, healing, and boon or buff uptime. Yes, healers have their rotations too, that your class has to offer depending on your build. Some rotations are easier than the others, but with enough practice and muscle memory, you can learn basically any rotation. Now, how do you go about finding your rotation? Well, there are two wonderful websites I use regularly to find rotations and builds for the classes I like to play. But in this case, let's go with Power Spellbreaker. These two sites are Hardstuck and Snowcrows. It probably sounds familiar after you've been playing for a while, but personally, I use this site in correlation with one another and seeing what kind of rotation I like. Sometimes they have the same exact rotation for the class because that is just the most optimal way for that class to function. I use Snowcrows for a more straightforward approach, and I use Hardstuck for a better breakdown of the class. I suggest using Hardstuck for beginners because they elaborate on the nuances of your classes. The good thing about Snowcrows though is that there is a video example of the rotation, so you would see it in action. But first, let's introduce you to Mr. Golem, the punching bag of the game. First off, he is found in Lion's Arch Aerodome. Lion Arc Aerodome in the Special Forces training area. Let us also introduce you how to set up the golem. Usually, you'd set it up for optimal situations in order to get a feel of the class at peak performance on the best circumstances, so just follow this when you want to train. Here is what I normally do when it comes to learning a build and rotation. I would first go on Hardstuck and read upon the breakdown and fundamentals of the rotation. Then, I would cross-reference it to Snowcrows. Things I would look out for is the gear and runes that they use, the traits they use, and the rotation itself. I would then try out the Snowcrows rotation first, then try out the Hardstuck rotation in order to get a feel for both rotations. Now, looking at this, it may look daunting for new players. Heck, I was baffled too when I saw this, going, what the hell is that? What's that long line of text? But don't worry, I'll break it down for you. There are two parts to a rotation, which is usually the opener and the weapon loops. You would perform the opener at the start of the battle, then continue with your weapon loops throughout the whole fight. In some cases, there are times where you have to precast some skills. These are called the precast rotations. These precast skills are skills that you cast before you even fight or encounter the boss. This would help for a stronger opener and rotation overall. And then you would perform the opener and then you would perform the weapon loops. These weapon loops are designed to loop endlessly, and in this case, I start off with a dagger loop, going into a greatsword loop, then going back to dagger, then vice versa. For me, personally, the best way to learn a rotation is to not learn it as a whole, but to learn it as chunks, because it helps me remember that way. You can also come up with different ways based on this method of mine to suit to your liking. So, what I would do is I would break it into pieces. Think of it as a big cookie. Everyone likes cookies, right? Anyway, I take these chunks off and I practice it over and over again until I'm ready for the next chunk, resetting after every successful rotation. And here's an example. After getting the hang of that chunk, I move on to another, but this time I will insert the previous chunk I did, like this. Then you do it over and over until you do a full rotation. Though there will be some cases wherein the rotation gets a little wonky due to the nature of the class. For example, Scourge. Scourge's rotation is casting skills off cooldown, but there will always be an optimal way to get your initial number up, and for this rotation, I'll be using Hardstuck as my opener rotation, then Snowcrows as my successive loop, while maintaining the notes from Hardstuck. This is where I utilize cross-referencing between the two sites. Don't get discouraged if you fail over and over. That's what practice is for, and practice makes perfect. You'll get it. I trust you. I believe in you. So after rambling over and over again with rotation, with skills, is it absolutely necessary to learn one? I would say yes and no, depending on what type of player you are. Normally, rotations play an important role more towards the end game of Guild Wars 2, so that would mean fractals, raids, and strikes. Learning at least one rotation will benefit you down the road since you will be learning more about your class, and it would definitely help your class feel like you own it. Having a rotation would make you deal double, almost triple your normal damage output. This comes in very useful in scenarios where you need to output a lot of DPS to avoid a mechanic or just to kill stuff really fast. Here are some general tips that would help you improve upon your rotations and performance overall. Tip number 1. Read your traits. It is pretty important to know what is giving what and what does this and that. Take your time and read all your trait lines. This will introduce a lot of flexibility in your playstyle, knowing which traits to take for which content. Tip number 2. Learn your chunks. I gave you the tools to break down a rotation, and it is important to read those skills in each chunk to see what does what. Knowing this will further improve your knowledge in a class and as to why it is placed in that chunk in the rotation. Tip number 3. Learn your fights. Things do not go the same way as you practice in the training area because you're just you and the golem. So it is very beneficial to know what you're getting into first before you do your rotation on a lot of things. And last tip, when practicing rotations, remember to take breaks. I have had so many times learning a rotation where I just couldn't get it down. It's just not working for me. And I just kept failing and failing. Remember to take a step back, take a breather, and try another time. You will get it eventually, I guarantee you. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you learned something new, and if you found it helpful, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.